If you have a problem getting the song you're working on to sound the way you want it to sound, most likely it's because of a lack of understanding of how things work at the base level. Meaning, you have a lot of tools, so many plugins. You've made thousands of choices without even really understanding what those choices are and what they're doing. That's why when you get into a problem, when you're in a corner where now you hear something that you don't like or you want it to go a certain way and it's not happening, you can't figure out why that is. This comes from the lack of understanding of the tools to their fullest degree. That's what it comes from. It doesn't come from a lack of tools. It doesn't come from needing the newest stuff that you don't have. It comes from not understanding the basic tools, the basic signal flow. It comes from adding a bunch of stuff without knowing why you added it. Let me show you what I'm talking about. We got Fab DuPont and Andrew Sheps talking to us on Puremix, which is one of my favorite channels. Fair use for teaching purposes. Fair use for teaching purposes. Here we go.
But I think a little more. I'm going to be a little more stark. I think it's really difficult for people to wrap their head around the reasons why their stuff doesn't sound the way they want, unless they've been in an environment that's more controlled than a digital workstation, because there are so many places could go wrong, and most I have a lot of guys here who are coming up and they're really good, otherwise they wouldn't be here. Like we filter, right? And even the best ones, sometimes see them do things in Ableton or in Logic or Pro Tools, and I look at it and I say, hey, why did you do that? And the answer is, oh, I saw you do it on a video, or I saw Andrew do
Yeah.
it on a video. And I'm like, but this is the exactly wrong thing to do right now, and that's the reason why is hurting your eyes. Why don't you turn it off? And I was like, well, I don't. They don't know what would happen if they turn it off. There's this like kind of not knowing the signal flow and not knowing, and it's a hindrance in the awareness and the conception of how things work. All of them are able to produce the out of everything. They're amazing. They're fast too, and they can do backflips and tricks and everything. But without the foundation, if there's a problem, they're stuck. And
Yeah.
it's tough. I don't know how to. I'm curious because Pure Mix, we tend to try and make sure people learn stuff. Um, I am trying to figure out a way to create a controlled, basically a redux of that immense playground with infinite toys, which is, I think you're right. It's a problem. It's too many options. Yeah, and I'm trying to. The PureMix plugin suite is one of those things, but I'm trying to come up with new ideas on how to do a redux, so people are forced to pay attention to what's going on, at least during their learning phase, and then they can do what they want.
I think one of the great things I've seen is people teaching like the way recording technology progressed. So like first
Hmm.
you're going to mix in mono, you have absolutely no effects, you just have faders. Now we're going to give you a pan pot. Now we're going to give you
Hmm.
one EQ on the mix bus. Now we're going to
Hmm.
let you have a compressor, but only one. And
Hmm.
so that way you are learning as you go, and you can build it up pretty quickly. I mean, you could do this over the space of just a few weeks or whatever,
Yep. Yep.
but yeah, and that will teach you to listen, because at first you're just like, oh, I need the kick drum to do something. Like, well, the kick drum is the kick drum. Now make it work. And I
Yep.
think that's the biggest lesson, is that no specific element needs to sound a certain way. They
Yep.
just need to work
It's
together.
Yep.
Learn how to listen. That's the biggest thing that they all said. And the way you learn how to listen is by using simple stuff and starting in increments so that you're not overwhelmed, and it's not even overwhelmed, it's more so that you don't get confused as to what is doing what. In other words, you hear what he said about this method. This is a great method for people to do, even guys who are seasoned, to kind of break it down to the most basic level. Because let me tell you, when Andrew Sheps mixed 99 Problems, the Jay-Z record that sounds amazing, produced by Rick Rubin, he had two 1176 compressors and a Fatso. That was his entire, like everything. He used the console to mix it, and those two compressors were his inserts, the two 1176s and one Fatso. That's it. He didn't have a ton of stuff. So that basic set of tools allowed him to get something that sounds amazing. You don't need tons of stuff. What you need to know how to use the stuff that's going to get it there in every way. In other words, he needed to know how to get the fader balance perfect. So the first thing somebody should do, like he said, start with just the faders and make something sound amazing that way. Get comfortable doing that. Then you add the pan pots. Get with the faders and the pan pots. What can you do? Then you add one compressor that you could use in parallel and share amongst everything. What can you do to make this great? Then you add one EQ on the mix bus. Now, what can you do to make this great? You understand? You work in, then maybe add one other compressor. The point is, once you start to really understand everything you could do, after that, maybe you add a channel strip to everything. But the point is this, I want you to realize that before you even get there, you need to be able to make things sound great and know why things are maybe not working or working and make them work. It's not about using a different kick drum sample to make something sound different. When somebody sends you tracks to mix, they're going to be not happy if you change up the sounds on them. You need to use what they give you and make it work. This is the art of mixing. Learning how to listen means learning how to hear what's really there and what's not, and what needs to happen to make it get there. Now, this, at the most basic level, using fader and pans, this is how pros used to do rough mixes back in the day, when there was a tape machine and if they needed to get something off to the person to be able to hear later and take it home with them. They would just do they wouldn't insert anything. They would not insert any compressors, because what if they were in another studio when they were finishing the record or whatever and they didn't have those? So the point is, they would always think that way. Somebody mentioned this is a great interview, you should watch this, but it's like 3 hours and 50 minutes, and there's a part in it where they mention about how when you're making rough mixes for people, like at the end of that, they just need something. You don't want to put like the Fairchild on it, because then if you're in a studio that doesn't have a Fairchild, now all of a sudden everybody's going to miss it. So like they would do just great level balancing, pan balancing, and just print a mix off, and the artist would fall in love with these mixes. And it was always a thing where you would do that, then you'd mix the song, and there'd always be like something about one of those roughs that they would have to beat because it was so good. And why is it so good? It's the simplicity, it's understanding the tools, it's knowing that you don't need all this stuff to make things sound good. You need to understand the way the signal flow works. You need to understand what you're adding at what point to make things great. Very simple. So I don't want to overcomplicate this, but what I'm basically saying is, on a practical level, you guys should all try this. Pick a few things. Like, you don't have to take it down to that basic of a level if you're on somebody who's mixing stuff that sounds really good already most of the time and you're just trying to learn some stuff. If you're up there, then you pick 5 things or something, but that's it. Pick 1 or 2 reverbs, 1 or 2 compressors, 1 or 2 EQs, and just do your whole mix like that. Because just basic stuff, as if you only had that gear with you and you have your DAW, or if you're working hybrid, you got your summing or whatever, and then make stuff work. That's really all you should be focused on, because it'll help you to improve. It's like swinging 2 bats. It's harder, so you'll be better. You don't need to throw a certain, and it'll also help the guys who don't know stuff. It'll help you learn what is actually doing what and how much you can really get out of something without doing all this extra stuff, which then you wind up having to remove and then could actually be hurting you, and you don't realize it's hurting you. It'll allow you to understand the tools so much better. And this, anytime you want to introduce a plugin, introduce like 1 plugin. That's it. And then work like that for a day or 2. Then introduce another one. You know what I'm saying? Think about it in that way. How many things do I need to make this work? And keep the list as tight as you can, because this will help you. And then at some point, once you know what you're doing and you're at the level where everything you love is great, everything you do, you love, at that point, then you use whatever you want. Abandon all these rules. But the point is, the concept of starting from a place of I only have this, I have to make it work, puts your brain in a whole different position than look at this sandbox full of stuff. Every grain of sand is a different plugin. And now what do I use? What do I pick? And you wind up picking all this stuff, doing all these things you've seen in videos, which is the exact wrong thing to do. You need to learn it yourself. This is why it's more important to me to talk to you about concept than it is to talk to you about what to do on what plugins. Because I had to learn at one point too. And when I learned, the concepts is what got me there, not twisting the knobs. You do that naturally when you're doing it, but if you don't know what you're looking for, what you're listening for, and you're just copying what somebody else is doing to achieve something, you're never going to get it. It's never going to click. You're just going to be copying. And then when you try to make something happen that you hear in your head, you won't be able to. That's the thing. It's exactly what they're saying. These guys that are so great as producers and they still can't get stuff to work when there's a problem, that's because they don't get the foundation. So build your foundation every day and build it from nothing, from very simple stuff. This is why anybody could do this, even with stock plugins. You don't need anything to be able to really learn and get better and make it where now you know how to listen. Learn how to listen, all right? Throw something in the comment section. I would really appreciate it. Hit the like button if you dug it. Subscribe if you haven't already. Evan Jaffe, Custom Cut Studios. You guys got this. Take it easy.